In an earlier video, we talked about maintenance to do at every 1,000 bales. This video will be about preventative maintenance at the 5,000 bale level. We'll also address some troubleshooting ideas on nodder if you're having some issues with nodder. So it's combine those two things together. I'm going to pull up one of these nodders to get started with. First thing we'll talk about is taking slack out of it. You'll want to check this out. I'm going to pull the pin out, roll one of these nodders up. When you take a nodder up, it should work like that. If you unhook it and put it up and it just slams back down real fast on its own, it's probably time to take a little slop out of it. Tighten the nodder stack up. If you don't tighten it up, you get too much slack in there. You got a gear that's going to jump over the cam gear and really mess things up. So if every 5,000 bales, check and see if that nodder just drops freely on its own accord. It's time to tighten it up a little bit. What it takes is I believe that's a 9/16. So to tighten it up, it's pretty simple. Just loosen this nut on this piece here, and all the slack is taken out of by tightening it on this one. And again, that's a 9/16 too. So you just tighten that up and then tighten this back up. So that's going to take if you have any excess play in there, that's going to happen. I would suggest looking at it every 5,000 bales. Another thing that is a normal wear item is the knife arm. The knife arm really has it's got three different points of maintenance on it. Of course, you got a blade, there's a roller, and there's the part that wipes the knot off the bill hook. So I've taken taking the knife out of here. In a minute, I'll talk about how relatively easy it is to take this off of that nodder. But so here's the actual blade that's cutting the string. A couple things can happen there. Obviously, it'll get dull, and it can get bent back too. If it's bent off of the plate here by relatively small amount, I'm gonna say 1/16 of an inch or 1/8, it's not going to be contacting the string correctly. So it's time to replace that little blade. There's two, you can take a grinder and grind these two rivets off, and they make a little kit that's got this blade, and you replace these rivets with 2 bolts. Pretty simple to do. The one thing you get aggravated quicker with knotting, tying issues than anything else. So keep an eye on that. Another part of the knife arm is the roller. This roller's running inside that cam, and this thing will get flat spots on it. So you'll want to look at that for flat spots. That you can either replace that, or you can just replace the whole knife arm. The other part that you have to keep an eye on, part of this knife arm is going to drag across the bottom of the bill hook like this. I don't know if you can see that, but it drags across the bottom of what's called the bill hook. That's part of the nodder, and that's what's wiping the knot off. That's wiping the knot off the bill hook. Somebody once told me, he said, no matter how mad you get at this baler, the only place you get to use a hammer on it is this part. So when it's not making real good hard contact all the way across, then it's time to take a hammer, and here it is right here. So you would take a hammer and tap that back. Make sure that's making real good tight contact with that bill hook. It should, like that. It's firm on there, and you want it to be rubbed hard or firmly all the way out to the end. I mentioned the roller on the end of it getting a flat spot wore down, and when that happens, that's limiting the travel of that knife arm. So this has got some extra paint on it, so it's on there really good and firm. But again, that's the things you need to look at on the knife arm. Another thing that you'll want to look at every 5,000 bales is the break on the needle. If you find yourself, if you're breaking needles or shearing a pin, due to the needles not being back in their home position, it's time to look at this. You got two bolts right here, or two nuts, I'm sorry, that you would tighten up. And all you want to do is have enough tension on that. It doesn't need to be too tight, but if this brake is just holding the needles back in their home position, if they're not staying in their home position but kind of traveling back in, then you'll want to look at, might be time to tighten that. So when the knot hangs on the bill hook, of course we talked about the knife arm, it's going to drag that off of there. You get a little bit of play in there, a little bit of tolerance, and it's not wiping it off as well. Another thing you can do is tighten this spring, this flat spring. It's a twine holder tension spring. You can tighten that down. I wouldn't suggest turning it more than, start with about 1/8 of a turn down to 1/4. One thing that's going to do, that's going to shorten up the tail on your knot. So here you got about 1 inch, which is ideal. But if this knot is still wanting to hang on the bill hook some, you could tighten this spring down, tighten it down 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn, and you'll notice that the tail of the knotter gets shorter. So this is 1 inch, this is maybe 1 inch and 1/8, that's ideal. But you can turn that down, but don't tighten it so far. It's gonna reduce the length of the tail. The point I was trying to make is don't go below 5/8. If you go below 5/8 of an inch of a tail by tightening this, you're gonna start having some problems with it in the bale chamber coming untied.